Phillips. My name is Capriana Phillips, and I'm facilitating the talk for this presentation. I'm Kanaka Maoli, which means I'm an Indigenous Hawaiian person. So I'm gonna be trying to not talk so much about Native American aspects, but also recognizing that Indigenous people exist globally instead of just on this continent. But also even then, Indigenous people on this continent don't get representation at all. Or when it is, it's really problematic. So thank you for coming out. I was really expecting to sit here and talk to myself. I appreciate it. I'm gonna try to share the screen. I'm also not very technologically savvy. I didn't grow up with internet, so I'm gonna try to share my screen. Ooh, is it this? Yes, I think it's that. Okay. Can you see my screen?
It's loading. Yep.
Okay.
You're good.
Do I view this? Present. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about decolonization and erasure. And I'm just one Indigenous person, so I don't take I'm not all Indigenous people. Decolonization means something different to every Indigenous person, and I'm just one person. And thank you for listening. So decolonization is about analyzing, deconstructing, and removing the infrastructure that upholds colonization, forced assimilation, and cultural erasure. Basically, how does colonization affect daily life and infrastructure of our world, societies, and cultures? By taking apart the pieces that uphold this oppression, we can better recognize it. And I do this in order to support my mental and spiritual well-being while learning more about my culture in a way that gives me my power back or a sense of stability in a culture and society that was created to ensure the genocide of my people. So I'm going to be focusing more on erasure, which is inherently tied to decolonization. So I've started this presentation out with this old 50s ad, or however old Betty Boop is, because this seems to be what people think of when they think of Hawaii when I've talked to them, and they'll be like, you don't look Hawaiian. And I'm like, oh, wait up, I'm sorry, was I supposed to be dressed like Betty Boop? Every day of my life, is this what I'm supposed to look like to you? But I digress. So this is media representation of people from where I'm from, Polynesia. Moana is meant to be vaguely Polynesian and not Hawaiian. So there's been a lot of discourse about how Maui is pretty much a racial caricature of who we are as people, but people were still oh, well, it's some form of representation. And then Lilo and Stitch, the setting is in Hawaii, but the story is not a Hawaiian story. The most recent development I've seen about Polynesian representation is Dugi Kamealoha, this new Disney reboot of the original Doogie Howser series. And the only person in this series who is an Indigenous Hawaiian person is the guy playing her father, who's up in the right. She herself is not a Hawaiian person. None of the people in this show are, but they are Hawaiian in the sense that they grew up there, the way that if you've grown up in Texas, you're a native Texan. And they have purposefully worded stuff when describing each of their actors to be able to kind of pass by their actors being Indigenous people by saying things like they were born, where does this? Oh, like this. The guy I think who plays Doogie's best friend is named Matsato. And they use the words Hawaii born native, and they do this for every single person that they describe, aside from the guy playing her father, to kind of make it sound like maybe they could be Indigenous, so that you don't have to have that conversation. But if you are, a Native Hawaiian person, both the capital, it'll be like a capital N and a capital H, because legally that is how we are described as people. They've done this for every person on this show, and people got really mad about it because the main character is playing a mixed indigenous person who's also Asian. She's Chinese and white. And so like a lot of the people in this like Disney show are like Asian, which does attribute to like stereotypes about what people in Hawaii are supposed to look like. And the vast majority of people in Hawaii are like mixed people, which is good. It would have been fine realistically if they had kept this concept and kind of put it in San Francisco, which is where all of these actors are from. It would have still been like a diverse kind of group of people, but you wouldn't have been contributing to cultural erasure by literally pretending like the protagonist is an indigenous person who's literally not. Especially when in Hawaii, this is a lesser known kind of issue that comes up, is that people in our government infrastructure tend to be, the demographic in Hawaii is mostly Asian people, and then it's white people. And those are the people who are mostly in our government. There's not a lot of indigenous representation. This past representative race, we just now got an indigenous person in office, which is good. But for our entire past and several decades, the representation or people who are in control of our lives and our livelihood as indigenous people has been the demographic majority, which is Asian people and white people whose political interests are not in the same place as ours because they're looking to make a profit. But it's also a geographically separate region from the United States. So Asian people who live in the United States face very different discrimination in comparison to where they're at in Hawaii, if that makes sense. So this is basically another form of cultural erasure. And these are the like old 50s ads that, in my experience, seem to be what people think of when they think of what I'm supposed to look like. I've had people literally tell me that they think Hawaiian people are just white people who moved to Hawaii and got tan because they were on islands. And I was like, that is not where Polynesian people come from. They're a group of Polynesian people. So there's the stereotype of we're always eating pineapples, even though it's not our indigenous fruit. Like, I'm supposed to look like the woman on the left here. That's apparently what I'm supposed to look like, even though this is an ad for people to come see Hawaii. And then on the right, there's this picture of basically what people associate with indigenous people a lot is over-sexualizing us because we're, exotic creatures for some reason to other people. And it's harmful that these still exist. Like, this is where it started in the past, but I'm gonna keep going through the presentation and kind of show you like similarities today. Yeah, this is me trying to explain what Polynesia is. So a lot of Polynesian people, we come from the Lupita people, which is like in East Asia, and they kind of came down towards the islands in Polynesia. But there's Micronesia, where's it? There's Micronesia, Polynesia, and Melanesia. The Lupita people came up like through like southeastern Asia and made their way down all the way throughout the Pacific. Let's see. So there's also the stereotype that indigenous people like are less developed cultures and societies, which is just very untrue and problematic. The hokulea is a ship, or like this large canoe that people made in Hawaii to see if we could have, as Polynesian people, circumnavigated the globe before Columbus. And this circumnavigation lasted for 3 years, and they accomplished it in 2017. The reason that this is important is because Polynesian people didn't use tools to navigate the ocean. They just did it all by hand. There was no like compass or like all this other junk. There's this practice that's like created and like enveloped over like several like thousands of years, for however long we've existed. Yeah, we had our own language. We still have our own language and culture and like spiritual practices. And because we're Indigenous people, it tends to be looked down upon as something that's like, again, like underdeveloped, or just like, because we're just existing outside of a, I don't know, city life, I guess. But yeah, Polynesian people are known for being skilled fishermen and ocean navigators, star charters, and farmers. We also had our own language. Aside from just like the verbal language, there was also Hawaiian Sign Language. Yeah, there's a difference between Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia. In Hawaii, there is actually a lot of discrimination towards Micronesian people, which is like a lesser known thing, I guess, if you're living in like mainland America. But they are separate groups of people who identify very differently. Even people who are within Polynesia, we have very like different cultures. So yeah. So tourism and exploitation has been something that is deeply rooted in Polynesian culture, but because I'm Hawaiian, I'm gonna focus on that area the most. You'll notice these places like next to the beach are literally all hotels. Everything is a hotel. Waikiki Beach is not a real beach. It was not created naturally. It was a man-made beach that they created to make tourists come. And that's those, you know, those old 50s advertisements of pinup girls and like, you know, like come to this island paradise, and realistically, it's like a place to exploit Native people and people who need 4 jobs to maintain their rent because the price of living is so high. So Indigenous people will leave because they can't afford to live in their native lands anymore. So this is typically what people think of, I guess, or what they see. This is Aulani Resort. This whole presentation is literally me just being like, I hate Disney. I wish Disney would burn to the ground. Like not really, but actually no. Yeah, I do. I do wish that, because they pretty much use things like Moana and like this Doogie Kamealoha. The guy who even advertises it, he's like, Kamealoha. That's not how you pronounce anything. It's really sad. And he's like basically talking about like Hawaii. The scenes that I watched for these advertisements are literally Doogie's mom and dad standing in a taro field. None of us are doing that. We are not out here like walking around fields with this big hat on. Like maybe if you're a wealthy Native person, or like a wealthy person who's probably not Native, to be honest with you, living in Maui or living in like Kauai or something. But these television shows are pretty much just like long-winded ads for Aulani Resort and stuff like that. Also, people in this corner doing like poi and these dances this is Tahitian, not Hawaiian. They're their own group of people, and they tend to kind of get morphed along with us, which is disrespectful to them because they have their own culture. So yeah, this is like the modern day version of this ad on the right. Literally, Moana is a tool that they have used to advertise their resorts. This old 50s ad is a bunch of white people like imitating hula, basically. This is what they're up to. And it's like, come to this Hawaiian paradise where everybody's using a ukulele and dancing on a ship, because that's what I'm doing every day. In case you want to know what I'm doing outside of this Zoom meeting, I like to play the ukulele and eat pineapples. And I'm always half dressed and I own a grass skirt. None of that stuff is what we do. It's like very like, it's a stereotype, but it also makes us into very 2-dimensional people. We're not standing around doing stuff like this. And this is going to be more like historical stuff, because I think like with the use of TikTok, a lot more people have understood or like listened to people when they talk about like Hawaiian history. Like I think more people now recognize that Hawaii was illegally overthrown by the United States, and our queen, we used to be a sovereign nation. and we were overthrown by the United States government via a businessman named Sanford Dole, who was essentially, his political motives were to make money because he was a businessman and to sell cane sugar and pineapples and use these plantations to be able to make as much money as possible. And he just, like, usual colonizer type stuff. So this is Queen Liliuokalani in this picture. And she was maintaining the nation before we got overthrown. So she was trying to restore Native rights and powers. And the group of people who tried to overthrow or succeeded in doing this, like this coup, was called the Committee on Annexation, which is a group of white businessmen and politicians. I have read AP history textbooks in high school where they use the words Hawaiian people overthrew her, which is not true, but they purposely, they do this a lot still, where they will use the word Hawaiian like it is Native people, but what they mean is people who have settled there and are living there, who are not from that place. So they've come and they've taken over, and they're like, we're Hawaiian people, and we've decided that we don't like you. And it's like, that's not what happened at all. Anyone who was indigenous, that's on the next slide though, let me see. Yeah, she was really good at running our government, to be honest. Let's see. Oh, sorry. When I was writing this, I put that there like as a joke, and then I forgot to erase it. I'm sorry. But basically, I hate this man. We all hate this man. I hope you do too at the end of this presentation. I don't know if you've ever seen those fruit cups that are like Dole, like the Dole fruit that kids like take during lunch. And they're like that sad like syrup plastic thing where there's like these little chunks of, yeah. So that's him. That's his legacy. He became the president of the like provincial government, which was the committee, those people. He refused to turn over power during, like with this committee. He was really aiming to like keep the United States government out of his biz so that he could just like run stuff and just like run amok and like be like, we are our own country. That is not Hawaii, it's actually America. It was really weird. But yeah, it's because of him that they were proclaimed a republic in 1894. There is a plantation in Hawaii that is basically where you can like get on this little train for tourists, and it's like you can look at how pineapples are grown and like cane sugar. Doesn't exist anymore. It used to like a couple years ago, but they plowed through the ground so much and did not they weren't stewards of the land essentially because they weren't indigenous people, and they messed it up, and now you can never grow anything on that dirt again because they've taken too much from it. But yeah, this is a maze that they created out of the plantation that you can like go get a ticket and you find all these different places in the maze and you get to the end of it, and I think like you can get some kind of prize if you get to all the different places inside the maze and like stamp your ticket. You can get ice cream. It's so fun when you make tourist attractions out of the oppression of people who were there before. Anywho. So there was a petition against the annexation of Hawaii that Sanford Dole, he wanted the annexation to happen. And there was a 556-page document that was signed and written by and created by very literate Native Hawaiian people, because we were forced to speak English for a very long time. And we're not allowed to speak our own language for like 70 years. So it was signed by 21,269 Native Hawaiian people, and which is more than half of 39,000 Native Hawaiians and mixed blood persons reported by the Hawaiian Commission Census for the same year. It was written in both languages of Hawaiian and English, and the treaty was defeated in the Senate because of the Spanish-American War in 1898. We were basically, I think the presidents at that time actually they recognized that what Sanford Dole was doing was illegal and immoral, and they were like, this isn't legal, like you can't do this. And they were going to turn it over until this happened, because Hawaii became a strategic naval installation for them to be able to win a war. And then they never left. They stayed and they were like, we're going to protect you. And then they never did. And they just took everything and made everything a hotel. Yeah, and then we were a US territory up until 1959, and I think became a state after that, but realistically that entire process was not legal. So, yeah, so our spiritual practices were banned for a long time. After annexation in 1898, Hawaiian as a language was officially banned from schools and the government. It was not legal to speak Hawaiian until 1978, which, like, because of that, you have generations of people who are like older who couldn't speak to younger children because they had grown up speaking English and weren't able to learn about their people or their history. So for a long time, Hawaiian like died out as a language, and then the only reason it survived was because of like the arts like hula and things like that, because you have to chant and do oli and stuff like that to be able to and know what the words mean. But even hula was banned. Like, you weren't supposed to be doing any of that. People were practicing it in secret, because it was like to colonizers or like settlers, they were like, this is this raunchy practice and it's super sexual, even though that's not what it was about at all. It was like prayer, literal prayers that we were doing that we still do today. Yeah, they Americanized schools in our culture, because this was by Americans. This wasn't the British who did this. This entire thing that happened was white America. Yeah, words in the Hawaiian language are very impactful and very sacred. And you're realist, like, our whole language is based on like you can't really even say certain things to people without cleansing yourself first, or like our names for things, or like even for our own people. So people who like kind of adopt Hawaiian names, which is also an issue in Hawaii, where people literally change their last name. Even if they're not Hawaiian people, they will change it to a Hawaiian name because they're like, I'm Hawaiian now because I've grown up here my whole life. And it'll be something that's like, not even like, it's just not respectful because of how we weren't allowed to, like, the reason a lot of Hawaiian people have a Hawaiian middle name and not a Hawaiian first or last name is because you could not choose your child's first name. It had to be a Christian anglicized name, and your last name was chosen by the government, basically. So like you became like anglicized, and you were like, this person, this is what's right, and you were supposed to kind of like convert to Christianity. Yeah, it just doesn't, like I have a Hawaiian middle name because of that, but that's a lot of people. But nowadays you can give your child a Hawaiian first name. But there's people who will try to kind of take on this image of being Indigenous people who aren't, because they don't recognize that Hawaiian people are Indigenous people, and it's not really okay. What's that? Yeah, this is stuff that I kind of was exposed to once I moved to Virginia. When I worked at Chick-fil-A, I used to ask people if they ordered Polynesian sauce, if they could name one place in Polynesia, like an island, and they'd be like, I just think it like sounds cool, but like I don't know what it is. And I'd be like, Hawaii, and they'd be like, oh, that's what I'm like, there's these places. But yeah, I've never tasted anything where I live. Nothing tastes like that sauce. I don't know why they chose it. I think they chose that name just because they think it sounds cool, but like, that's weird to me that was a thing that happened. And then there's some like Country Cookin' is a place, also several other places that I've been to when we moved here, where they put pineapple chunks on stuff and then they're like, it's Hawaiian now. People told me like when I moved here that I don't look Hawaiian for certain things. I really should have just been carrying around a pineapple. It really would have, maybe they would have believed me. But Yeah, just because you put pineapple on stuff doesn't make it Hawaiian. It's actually an indigenous fruit to Mexico or like South America. We also did trade with them to get taro root, which is one of our sacred foods. Monsanto, like a GMO, he's like the head of the GMO folks, was trying to make GMO taro in Hawaii, and people got really mad at him for it. So people are very like anti-GMO because he was literally trying to like steal sacred foods from our taro patches and then make money off of it. There's also this trend in like American schools where they have like Spirit Day. And this is like some tropical day event. There was a girl who came to my class. I vividly remember this. She came into my English class. She was like another student in our class. And she came in with this lei. She was a white girl with like blonde hair and blue eyes, and she was white. And she was like, had on like this plastic lei and this coconut bra and like a grass skirt. And she was holding a pineapple cup that was made of plastic, and she walked in and made like this big entrance and was like, aloha, and I wanted to do terrible things, but nobody noticed that like that what that was like that was a racist caricature of like where I come from. And I understood that, but I was filled with rage, but I didn't hurt anybody. But I kind of had to try to explain that to a couple of people that that's realistically like, this isn't cool. This is literally Betty Boop. This is what y'all are. For people who, I think when people think of Hawaii, a lot of times they think of hula. There's different kinds of hula. This is the one, hula awana is the one that is very like for tourists that we do at like luau's and things like that. This is at the Merry Monarch Festival. This is like legitimate halaus. You can watch it every year. What is it called? The Merry Monarch Festival. You can like tune in and watch it. And this is like professional hula dancers who do this for a living. And this is typically the type that gets shown at like resorts and stuff like that. Yeah, you'll notice they're covered up a lot more in these, but it's because settlers were like, you have to not move so much. You can't be moving your hips so much because it's sexual and like all these things like that. Or they would, try to sell it in the 50s for being this like paradise place on the left, like people are dancing around like with these things. Or like, men have to cover up their whole body, which is generally not what people were doing in hula kahiko. This next one is kind of more like traditional hula. You'll notice that for the men, it's like a very different setup of how they're dressed. But also like our more traditional colors are like yellow and red. This woman won like the single dancing for hula in the kahiko category, I think in like 2016. But yeah, she's pretty famous for that. But also all these people get their hair like permed to be in uniform with each other so that their hair looks like more like how our ancestors looked, I guess. But yeah, this is like traditional versus kind of like the more modernized touristy one, in case you're interested. This was a Kylie Jenner packet, like, what is it, eyeshadow thing, where she used a couple of words that, like, how people will use indigenous or like native stuff to make it seem like exotic, or they're like, this is me being creative, but they just stole words from somebody else's culture and they were like, I'm gonna put it on here. Yeah, Kilauea is a mountain. Where is this? Oh, Pele's curse. Pele is a goddess in our culture. She's really important to us. And she like she does curse people, but like, I don't know, it's just very like two-dimensional, especially if you're not an indigenous person. Like it'd be different if you were, but this is not for you. Like this is not something that, she's literally a god that we like, when we do prayers on Mauna Kea, she's somebody that you're trying to appease. Like, and also respect. Yeah. Yeah, Kilauea is also very important to us. It's a very like, it's not so much like Mauna Kea, but it is an important like volcano to us. I think that might be where Pele lives. Can't remember. Let's see. Yeah, this was someone who actually came to talk at VCU named Karen Wood. she made really, really good points that I wanted to kind of bring to light in case less people knew about it, about how Indigenous people get marginalized by the words people use every day to kind of reference us. Words like, like tribe, village. Like, you live in a house and I live in a hut, but that's not what I live in, like at all. Like, my house is still a house, even though it doesn't look like your house, right? Like, or these people live in villages, you live in a city. Like, that's realistically, like, you live in a group of people. It's the same thing, you're just doing it on a larger scale. But these words kind of tend to invoke feelings of like Indigenous people lack complex thought in societies, and it's why it's okay that colonization happened, because we gave them all of this stuff. We gave them all of this technology and medicine, even though realistically what settlers did when they came here is killed off 90% of the population. And then to be like, oh, well, you still use you use this technology, you're using a computer right now. I've been forced to assimilate to a system to survive, to be able to like make it in a world that's been essentially like created to enforce genocide. But yeah, these words kind of make it seem like Indigenous people lack complex thought or societies, or like kind of like I've noticed in a lot of classes here, if they're intro classes, they always start with the Greeks, and they never start with anyone before that or anyone who's an Indigenous person, because God forbid Indigenous people had any sense of philosophical thought or infrastructure. Like, I believe it was South America. There's a couple places, but the ones that I remember was Indigenous people in South America had like hella libraries where they had documented all kinds of things, but the Spanish came and burned all of their libraries down, so that they didn't have any documentation for things. And that happened globally, because they were like, the things that you keep in these houses are demonic. The things you practice are not how I believe you should be living your life. And because of that, I've decided to burn your house down, and now you're a Christian. There is a film called The Rabbit Proof Fence that's about Aborigine Australians, and it focuses on the history of Australians, like settlers in Australia, forcibly taking Aboriginal people and bringing them to camps for them to never be with other Aboriginal people to like procreate. They needed them to have children with white people so that they could eventually breed the demon and the skin tone out of them, so that they wouldn't be Aborigine anymore. And when people talk about you don't look like insert whatever race, you are actively contributing to this idea that genocide never happened. Like, that people who are Indigenous were never raped or forced to assimilate by white people. A lot of Indigenous people have light skin like myself, but you like to be told that you don't look like Pocahontas, you don't look like Moana. And then you look at the people who voice all the people in Moana. A lot of the characters in that cartoon are brown people, but you'll see the people who are voicing them they're all Indigenous people, they're all Polynesian people. A lot of them are lighter skinned because colonization happened to us. When you say things like, you don't look like what I would expect you to because you don't look like a cartoon, I'm not an animated character, I'm a real person. And also, we were murdered by people and forced to assimilate, and now we're only like 10% of our own population, when we used to be the entire population of that continent, or that island, or that region of the earth of Polynesia. So the results of taking up all of the land and like forcing hotels to be everywhere, where you can kind of like, the whole point is to exploit and find money out of these like beautiful tropical places, and For Hawaiians, when the price of the land goes up, because it's a place where everyone wants to live, it's a tropical place, and everyone's like, oh, I want to come visit this place and take up space in all of these, in like hotels and stuff like that. People want to visit to tour and go to their island paradise. And because of this, it forces people who are indigenous, who are still living there, to get several jobs and live with each other. There are no indigenous people that I knew growing up who are our family members who live by themselves. You live with your whole family because all of you have to have multiple jobs to be able to pay to live in one house, because you are not getting paid the way that some wealthy billionaire who lives in Manoa can just relax there and stay there. So it creates these health problems. And like our state food is Spam. We know how to cook it well. We cook like musubis and stuff like that. But the food habits are not things that were native to our past diets, because stuff is way more expensive now when you live there. Anything that you go when you live there is extremely expensive to live there. So indigenous people tend to leave. And that is something that was mandated, like the government has tried to get people who are indigenous to leave so that they can take up more and more space and profit off of it as much as they can. Hypertension, obesity, and diabetes are all stress-related illnesses. And it is a direct correlation that the price of housing has all gone up and there's no access to whole foods and things like that. Or even being able to go out to the beach because you're at work constantly. Yeah, this is from a previous presentation I did before, where I literally Googled Pocahontas's name, and it's a picture of Pocahontas from Disney. Like the original Pocahontas did have portraits made of her. And I would hope by now a lot of people recognize that like that entire movie is extremely problematic, because she was a child who was kidnapped by a 30-year-old man who had a crush on her. Like that's messed up. Like she lived an extremely brutalized life, and when she died, she was bleeding out on the River Thames. So with like taking Halloween into account, I had a lot of people ask me about like, like I understand people kind of wearing native costumes because it's like, they admire Pocahontas. And it's like, if you do admire, like your child admires Pocahontas and you have like, that is indeed your child's hero, let children be children sort of thing. Like, if you do respect indigenous people and an indigenous person is your hero, you would listen to them when they tell you that they don't want you to buy native costumes because it degrades their culture, Native American people. And also, there is no costume that you could wear for a child of Pocahontas bleeding out on the River Thames from infection after being taken from her homeland to Europe. Like this story is extremely messed up just because they romanticize genocide. And they continue to do that with things like Dugi Kamealoha. And our society does kind of support this narrative of, oh, well, we just want to participate in your culture and we think it's amazing, but you're not participating in my culture when what you want to do is be entertained by my culture. My culture is more than hula dancing and luau's and the beach. I don't even know if I can see these on here, but yeah, these are TikToks by Hawaiian people. I think you might have heard of Shino Nova. She's pretty popular. But I've noticed that a lot of times to be listened to as an indigenous person, you have to be performing your identity for people, which nobody should have to do. I don't need to carry around a pineapple with me for you to recognize that I'm indigenous to Hawaii. Like, nobody has a right to be telling you what you are and what you aren't when they literally don't even know where you come from. This person, what is it? Yeah, her name is Melamai Kalani Makalapua. She has like her own TikTok thing where she does a lot of like, she will teach you stuff about Hawaii and our practices and stuff like that, and like social justice issues pertaining to us. A lot of it is her doing hula dances. I'm not sure if she's a kuma, which is like a hula teacher, which is the only people you're allowed to learn hula from, to be respectful. I wanted to show this video. I don't know if it'll come up. I just found it, but yeah, these are not indigenous people. Hopefully they're doing a Hawaiian chant called Oli. This is today. This was made like recently. You still see stuff like this on the internet, and he's indigenous, he's Hawaiian. He's like, this is really messed up. But they were dressed up like they went to like a Halloween store to get someone's like Native American costume, but are singing a Hawaiian chant. And it's just really weird. And then they didn't apologize for it either. They were like, I was called to do this because I respect your, like, please don't do that. If there's anything that you can take away from this, please don't do stuff like that, like as a bare minimum. But yeah, yeah, for the Doogie Howser thing, I'm sure this is just like a rant. I hope this isn't like a rant, but yeah. This kind of erasure does directly affect Hawaiian people and indigenous people. When they came to film this, they blocked off the third building of the university in Hawaii, that building, to film this, which gives further hurdles to indigenous people trying to receive higher education, on top of literally not putting any indigenous people in this, aside from the guy on the far right here, who's playing her dad. Yeah, I would just hope people look more closely into things that portray indigenous people. Things like, you know, like Twilight, where Taylor Lautner's been put as some indigenous guy who imprints on a fetus, like he's not indigenous. And also, like, indigenous people aren't just like tanned white people. We can look like anything because a lot of us are mixed people. So you shouldn't really be telling anyone they don't look indigenous when colonization happened. Hopefully, like, that's a big thing that people get told a lot. But yeah, this happens in our day-to-day life, and I would hope that it kind of comes more to life how to recognize when this happens and not support it, or at least tell other people that this is not okay. Like, but yeah, that's mostly it. I hope it was informative. Sorry if this is literally me just screaming for, like, I try not to be like ranting constantly to people, but you know, it is aggravating. And I don't think people should get mad at people for having emotions. But yeah, thank you for coming to listen to this.
Did anybody have any questions or any commentary that they wanted to add? We'll give it a second. If you have anything to add or share or ask, definitely feel free to just drop it in the chat, or if you're comfortable, you can just come off of mute and let us know.
Yeah, I don't want to come off like I'm going to cut your head off if you ask a question. I'm really not trying to be mean. I won't be mean to you. I understand if, because you came here to learn about stuff. I ain't going to be mad at you. It's nice that you came. But like, oh yeah.
Hi, my name's Debo. I use they, them. So you were saying that somebody who wants to do traditional dance has to go see somebody who specifically teaches like hula. And so are there, Like, are there people who teach like traditional dance to people who are not Indigenous around Virginia?
Oh, there's stuff you can actually go to online. There's like a couple. There's like, as long as you're joining a hula halau, I know that they have them. You can look them up in Virginia and just look up hula halau. I can type it in the chat if you don't know how to spell it. But like, let me see. You could probably just type this and it'll like give you some, because it's not really like a blocked off cultural practice when it's certain stuff, because there's stuff like, you know, like hapa hula, where they're teaching stuff like keep your eyes on the hands, and the whole song is like, there's literally a song, by the way, that's all in English, talking about how basically stop sexualizing hula and focus on people's hands, because that's what they're telling the story with. But it's hilarious because it's from the 1950s and it's like bad, but it's funny. But yeah, thank you for asking the question. It's yeah, it's hula halaus. As long as you join one of those, you're fine. But as long as you're not like trying to sexualize us and stuff like that, I don't think anyone would be mad at you.
Right. I know, like my mom went on a cruise and they were like, we're like a Hawaiian cruise, and she did this like hula class, and I'm not really sure what the whole situation was, but I was like, I don't know what they're
they do stuff like that to pull in tourists. It's to pull you in as a tourist, just like how a lot of like luau's aren't like real luau's that we would practice. Like they're very touristy, and they have like fire poi going on and all these dances, but it's like, it's mostly to make money off of people. Oh, close practices. I don't know if you've heard about TMT, the telescope that they're trying to build on Mauna Kea, which is basically like our Notre Dame. Like you wouldn't build like a 30-foot telescope on top of Notre Dame. There are prayers that we do on top of that mountain that are like religious practices. So I would assume that that would be closed off. But so much of our culture has been exploited to the point where like a lot of things kind of like have a blurred line by now. Trying to think. Like naming your child a Hawaiian name when you're not a Hawaiian person would probably, like, I know that's not like a spiritual practice, but to us it kind of is, because you don't just name your child anything. Like the name comes to you off the wind, and then it's like sometimes it was like to keep demons and stuff away, like bad spirits. We would name our kids like Makapiapia, which is like sticky eyes, like to keep demons away from them. And then later on, when they were safe, you'd name them like a nicer name. But yeah, also our names have very deep meaning to us. Like to Indigenous people, like our language is very important to us. So I would try not to use our words and things like that in a way to like sound exotic or culture, to like you wouldn't do that to anybody though, I would hope, you know. But yeah, praying on like Mauna Kea and stuff like that. I'm really trying to think. Let's prepare. But yeah, hula is fine as long as you're joining a halau and you're not like, the same thing goes for like Tahitian dance. Yeah. Also, thank you, Christina Davis, for that comment in the group, in the chat. I'm sorry I didn't see this. I'm bad at technology.
Kap, what do you think would be the best way to learn about a culture that is not your own? Like finding reliable, sources of information while, like maintaining respect and honoring customs and things like that. Like in your personal opinion, obviously you can't speak for everybody.
If you have a friend, right, and your friend is from that culture and they invite you to do something, that's cool. That's fine. They're like, hey, I want you. If I asked you to put like, I have something on right now. Yeah, that's like that we use for hula. Let me see. This is a pa'u skirt, right? This is what we use for hula. It'd be fine if you were to wear that for a hula halau, but if you're just walking around and you're not Indigenous and you're just out here, like that's kind of weird to me. Like, I don't know if anyone would like come for you, but I'd look at you sideways a little bit. Then there's things like sacred things that people have from their culture are not for everybody. for everybody else, especially when everything has been taken from those people. Yeah, I would say if you've been invited to participate in something, you should. And also, something I found out is, honestly, TikTok has people who you can literally listen to. Their whole thing is them being part of their own identity, their own group, and it's like a primary source. And there's multiple people who are from that same group who will either echo the same things or have their own opinion about something, and you can kind of get like a more well-rounded understanding of it. Also, for things like Indigenous people in Hawaii, the University of Hawaii has public articles that you can look at to learn about our history, to learn about setting records straight for things that you don't understand, or like cultural practices. Yeah, but reading published articles that are not political narratives as well. So like CDC, like the government census, not the CDC, the government census will literally tell you how many people are in a place. Like I think in Hawaii, it's like 10%. 10% of people are Native Hawaiian, according to the government census in that state. Like you can look up like hard facts so that you're not, oh, here's a good one. When you have a perceived understanding of how something is, don't like preach that you know what it is when you're not from that group of people, if that makes sense. Like you could keep it and kind of like actually like actively think about it. But if you're with somebody who was part of that group, listen to what they have to say instead of talking over them and telling them, oh, well, they don't know what they're talking about, or because that's just, I don't know why you would do that, but that's happened to me. It's happened to me with people being like, well, you don't look like a stereotype of what I have these preconceived notions of. So you can't be a genuine source. And it's like, I don't have to perform my race. I don't have to perform anything for you to be who I am as a person. I wouldn't ask someone who's non-binary or someone who's like, like of any group of people to be like, you have to be androgynous to be them. You are I don't know you. You know you better than I know you. Why would I be telling you, you're not this? You're me. I'm actually you. I live in your head and I'm a figment of your imagination. And I'm gonna tell you what you are instead of literally just listening to you tell me what your identity is. I don't know why you would do that. That's super weird to me and disrespectful. Yeah, I think if you're invited to something, what else is there? Invited. Yeah, like don't talk over people and probably just try to listen to people who actually are from that group. I feel like it's a lot more accessible now when we have TikTok, because my boyfriend will be like, oh, I don't know things about trans people in sports. Wants to talk about that. I'm like, there's literally people on the internet who are trans, who have all of these documents laid out for you. They got like links to sources who are talking about this stuff. And you want to be like, it doesn't exist. It exists. It's right there. And then I've sent people links to stuff. Like you can be that person for your own group of people, but I would try to like listen to people who are from those groups.
Any other questions, y'all, or comments? All right, well, we will go ahead and wrap it here. Thank y'all for coming out. We really appreciate y'all being here. We will get together and compile some resources and shoot out a follow-up email. This session was recorded again. We'll get it in Kaltura so it is captioned and accessible, and we'll send that out as soon as we possibly can. Y'all please be patient with me. It's been really hectic, but we'll get that out for y'all. I'm really grateful for everybody being here in the space, and thank you again, Capriana. You did amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so grateful for you. Thank y'all so much, and y'all have a good evening.